My name is Natalie Bennett. I'm 35 years old, a corporate fraud attorney, and the last person my parents expected to see at my father's black tie birthday gala. I had barely crossed the ballroom when my mother's voice sliced through the orchestra. "How dare you sneak in here?" She marched toward me, raised her jeweled hand, and slapped me in front of nearly 200 guests. The impact turned my face sideways, but I didn't let go of the leather portfolio tucked beneath my arm. That portfolio was the reason I had returned after 11 years. My father hurried over, not to defend me, but to seize my elbow. "Leave through the kitchen," he whispered. "Don't embarrass this family again." My younger sister stood behind him, wearing the diamond necklace that had once belonged to my grandmother, smiling as security closed in around me. They thought I had come begging for forgiveness. They thought I was still the frightened 23-year-old they had disowned for refusing to abandon my unborn daughter. They had no idea that for the past 6 months, I had been investigating the charity foundation hosting their gala. They didn't know the documents in my hands could expose stolen donations, forged contracts, and the lie that had built my sister's career. Most importantly, they didn't know the guest seated beside the stage had already reviewed every page. One guard reached for my arm. Before he could touch me, a chair scraped across the marble floor. Governor Thomas Reynolds stood, buttoned his jacket, and stared directly at my father. "Do you know who she is?" he asked. The room fell silent. My mother's expression changed first. My father looked down at the portfolio beneath my arm, and for the first time that night, I saw fear replace contempt in his eyes. "Before I tell you what happened after that, tell me where you're watching from and what the weather is like where you are. I just want to know how far my story can travel." 11 years earlier, my parents had treated my pregnancy like a public relations emergency. My father, Charles Bennett, was expanding Bennett Meridian Holdings into political consulting and luxury development. My mother, Victoria, chaired several charities and had built her identity around being admired by people whose names appeared on hospital wings. An unmarried pregnant daughter did not fit the polished family portrait they sold to donors and investors. They never asked whether I was frightened or whether the baby's father had disappeared after learning I was pregnant. Instead, they brought me into my father's study and placed 3 documents on his desk: an appointment at a private clinic, a non-disclosure agreement, and a one-way ticket to Europe. My mother told me I could come home when the problem had been taken care of. I refused. Before sunrise, my father removed me from the family trust. My younger sister, Chloe, watched from the doorway. Later, she told our relatives that I had stolen money and run away. That lie allowed my parents to explain my disappearance without admitting they had abandoned their pregnant daughter. I slept in my friend Emma Sullivan's laundry room, worked evenings at a legal records company, and attended community college while carrying my daughter, Maya. Eventually, I earned scholarships, transferred to law school, and built a career investigating financial crimes hidden behind polished reputations. My family never contacted me, but they used my absence whenever it benefited them. Chloe told interviewers she had taken over the family foundation after her unstable older sister caused a scandal. My mother gave speeches about protecting vulnerable young women while refusing every letter I sent containing photographs of her granddaughter. My father allowed newspapers to describe him as a grieving parent whose eldest child had vanished because of addiction. None of it was true. For years, I considered correcting the record, but survival demanded more energy than revenge. Then, 6 months before the gala, a whistleblower walked into my office carrying a box of donor statements from the Bennett Family Renewal Foundation. Her name was Evelyn Brooks, the foundation's former finance director. She told me that millions of dollars intended for housing programs had been transferred into consulting companies controlled by Chloe and several of my father's associates. She had reported the discrepancies internally. 2 days later, Chloe accused her of theft and had her fired. Evelyn believed my family planned to destroy the remaining records during the Foundation's annual gala, which also happened to celebrate my father's 65th birthday. I initially refused the case because of the conflict. Then Evelyn handed me a copy of an authorization form bearing my signature. According to the document, I had approved the transfer of $1.8 million from a youth housing fund 11 years earlier, the very same week my parents threw me out. My family had not merely erased me, they had kept my name alive as a financial scapegoat. The forged authorization made it appear that I had stolen charity money before disappearing. That was why they had spread the addiction story. It wasn't shame that had driven them to exile me. It was preparation. If investigators ever discovered the missing funds, the disgraced daughter would take the blame. I stared at the signature long enough to recognize Chloe's habit of curling the final letter in my name. She had practiced signing my name when we were teenagers. Suddenly, every article, every rumor, and every unanswered letter became part of the same design. Have you ever wondered how much cruelty a family can hide behind the phrase, "We only wanted what was best for you"? I accepted Evelyn's case, disclosed my connection to the authorities, and began building a timeline. I didn't plan to storm into the gala and scream accusations. I planned to let my parents create the perfect audience for their own destruction. Governor Thomas Reynolds wasn't a heroic stranger who just happened to notice me being humiliated. 3 years earlier, I had represented a state procurement officer who uncovered a bid-rigging scheme involving one of the governor's largest political donors. My work recovered public funds, exposed a network of fraudulent contractors, and helped establish an independent financial integrity task force. Governor Reynolds and I weren't friends. We had never shared private dinners or exchanged holiday cards. But he knew my reputation, understood how carefully I handled evidence, and trusted that I would never bring him an accusation I couldn't support. When Evelyn brought me the Foundation's records, I didn't call the press or threaten my parents. I disclosed my connection to the case, handed the verified documents to the task force, and stepped back while forensic accountants traced the money. They followed donations through shell companies, inflated consulting contracts, fake vendor invoices, and real estate purchases connected to Bennett Meridian Holdings. What they found was even larger than Evelyn had suspected. The missing $1.8 million linked to my forged signature was only the foundation of the fraud. Over 9 years, more than $14 million had been diverted from shelters, scholarship programs, domestic violence services, and emergency housing grants. Chloe authorized most of the transfers. My father signed the final approvals. My mother used photographs of unfinished buildings, borrowed furniture, and staged ribbon-cutting ceremonies to convince donors the programs existed. Whenever local organizations asked where the money had gone, she blamed permit delays, staffing shortages, or government bureaucracy. The governor agreed to attend the gala because the foundation had invited him months earlier to announce a major state partnership. After reviewing the preliminary findings, he canceled the partnership privately, but kept his name on the guest list. His presence was strategic. My parents could dismiss me as bitter, unstable, or jealous. They could not so easily dismiss the governor, state investigators, donor representatives, and authenticated financial records standing in the same room. When he rose and asked, "Do you know who she is?" He wasn't rescuing me. He was opening the door I had spent 6 months positioning him beside. My father released my elbow immediately. "Governor, this is a private family misunderstanding," he said, forcing a smile that looked painful beneath the ballroom lights. Governor Reynolds stepped into the center of the room. "No, Charles. The moment your foundation submitted forged financial documents to the state, it stopped being private." The security guards backed away from me. Several guests lowered their glasses. One donor pulled out his phone and began recording. Chloe's smile disappeared, but my mother recovered first. She had spent her life surviving social disasters by acting as though everyone else had simply misunderstood the situation. "Governor, you've been deliberately misled," she said. "Natalie has resented this family for years. She has a history of instability." I opened the leather portfolio and removed the authorization form bearing my forged signature. "Is this the instability you mean?" I asked. "According to your foundation, I personally approved the transfer of $1.8 million 11 years ago. At the time, I was 23 years old, pregnant, homeless, and held no position in the organization." My father glanced at Chloe. It lasted less than a second, but the entire room noticed. That single look carried fear, recognition, and blame. Chloe stepped forward and let out a brittle laugh. "Anyone could have created that copy. You're a lawyer. You know how easy it is to manipulate paperwork." I had expected that response. The screen behind the stage had been prepared for a tribute video celebrating my father's achievements. At my signal, the event technician replaced the smiling photographs with a scanned ledger. The first page showed the forged transfer. The second showed the money moving into a consulting company formed by Chloe's college roommate. The third showed that company purchasing a condominium Chloe had lived in for 6 years. Additional pages revealed payments for private travel, luxury renovations, political consulting, and a yacht club membership disguised as community outreach. Whispers spread throughout the ballroom. One donor recognized the name of a housing program he had personally funded. "That project never opened," he said. Another guest compared the ledger with a donation receipt on her phone and realized her contribution had been redirected just 48 hours after she made it. My mother lunged toward the technician. "Turn that off immediately." Governor Reynolds raised one hand. "No one touches the equipment." 2 members of the state task force stood near the ballroom doors, dressed as ordinary guests. They didn't arrest anyone. Their role was even more damaging: to preserve the evidence, observe every reaction, and prevent documents or electronic devices from disappearing. My father understood immediately. "Natalie," he said softly, abandoning the commanding tone he had used moments earlier. "Whatever you believe happened, we can discuss it privately as a family." I looked at the man who had erased me, forged my name, and allowed the world to believe I was an addict and a thief. "You had 11 years to speak to me as family," I replied. "Tonight, you can speak to me as counsel for the whistleblower you tried to frame." Chloe tried to regain control by turning the accusation back on me. "Tell them why you really left," she shouted. "Tell them you got pregnant, rejected every chance we gave you, and disappeared because you couldn't handle responsibility." She expected my pregnancy to humiliate me. For years, my family had treated it like a stain they could expose whenever I became inconvenient. Instead, it gave me the opening I had been waiting for. "I didn't refuse help," I said. "I refused an abortion arranged to protect the Bennett family brand." The room became so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigeration unit behind the bar. My mother's face hardened instantly. "That is a disgusting distortion," she said. "We tried to protect your future." I removed another set of documents from the portfolio. The first was the confirmation of an appointment at a private clinic signed by my mother. The second was a non-disclosure agreement drafted by my father's attorney. It required me never to discuss the pregnancy, the clinic, my removal from the family trust, or any financial activity involving the Bennett Family Renewal Foundation. The final clause stated that violating those terms would permanently eliminate any claim that I or my child might have to family assets. "You tied my daughter's future to my silence," I said. "When I refused, you cut me off before sunrise and used my name on a fraudulent transfer." My father's longtime attorney stared at the agreement, then slowly took several steps away from him. Chloe insisted she knew nothing about the clinic or the forged authorization. So I displayed an email recovered from an archived Foundation server. In it, she told my father that blaming the missing funds on me would be believable because I was already leaving in disgrace. She suggested telling relatives I had developed an addiction because donors and investigators would be less likely to question financial misconduct committed by someone described as unstable. Another email showed her asking whether my signature still existed on old Foundation volunteer forms. Chloe turned toward our parents. "You told me those emails had been deleted." The admission slipped out before she realized what she had said. Gasps rippled through the room. My father closed his eyes. My mother gripped the edge of a table, but there was no sudden illness, no fainting spell, and no convenient medical emergency to divert attention from the evidence. She remained standing as the reputation she had spent decades polishing disintegrated in front of the people whose approval mattered most to her. I continued. Photographs appeared on the screen showing the Foundation's supposed women's shelter as an empty warehouse owned by a Bennett subsidiary. In donor brochures, the building had been digitally altered to include landscaped grounds, furnished bedrooms, therapy offices, and a children's play area. In reality, the windows were boarded up, and the water had been disconnected for 3 years. Invoices claimed the charity had purchased beds, security systems, medical equipment, and counseling services. Instead, the money had financed the ballroom hosting us, Chloe's destination wedding, my parents' anniversary cruise, and lobbying expenses for one of my father's development projects. Then I played a recorded call Evelyn had captured after my mother ordered her to alter a donor report. My mother's voice filled the ballroom. "People don't give money for accounting details. They give money for the story we tell them. Clean up the numbers and stop acting as though anyone wants the truth." Several charity board members moved toward the exits, but investigators politely asked them to remain available for statements. One woman who had served beside my mother for 12 years removed her foundation pin and placed it on a table without saying a word. My mother looked at me with the same cold expression she had worn in my father's study 11 years earlier. "You would destroy your father on his birthday?" she asked. "You would humiliate your own mother in front of our friends?" There it was. The family rule beneath every other rule. Their fraud was a private mistake. My resistance was public betrayal. Their cruelty was protection. My truth was revenge. "You chose the location," I replied. "You invited the donors whose money you took. You invited the reporters who praised your generosity. You invited the governor because you wanted his endorsement. You even built a stage for tonight." I looked around the ballroom. I simply decided to use it. My father insisted he had only approved summaries prepared by employees and had never examined individual transfers. I displayed scanned copies of his handwritten notes beside 3 separate transactions. On one, he had written, "Use NB authorization if questioned." On another, he had instructed Chloe to divide a payment into smaller amounts so it would not trigger an automatic audit. The third note directed staff to backdate invoices to the week I was disowned. He had not overlooked the fraud. He had engineered my role in it. For years, I believed he had rejected me because he thought I had embarrassed him. The truth was colder. My disappearance gave him a signature he could exploit, and a daughter no one expected to hear from again. I looked at him and asked the question that had followed me through every night class, every unpaid bill, every fever Maya suffered while I worked beside her bed, and every moment I wondered whether I had somehow deserved their hatred. "When you looked at your pregnant daughter, did you see a child who needed you, or did you see the perfect person to blame?" His mouth opened, but nothing came out. He looked toward my mother, then toward Chloe, searching for someone willing to answer for him. No one did. His silence was the first honest thing he had ever given me. My mother finally abandoned denial and demanded loyalty. "Richard built everything in this room," she said, raising her voice so the guests could hear. "Whatever accounting mistakes may have occurred, this family has created jobs, funded hospitals, supported schools, and helped thousands of people. You cannot reduce an entire legacy to a few questionable transfers. Before I could respond, Evelyn stepped out from among the guests. My parents had not known she would attend. She wore a simple navy dress and carried the original backup drive Chloe had ordered destroyed. "It was not a few transfers," Evelyn said, and when I refused to alter the reports, Chloe threatened to accuse my son of hacking the foundation. Chloe moved toward her, but a task force investigator stepped between them. Evelyn explained that she had preserved payroll records, internal messages, donor correspondence, and audio recordings from executive meetings after realizing the foundation was preparing to blame lower-level employees. She described how staff members were ordered to create false invoices, how contractors were paid for buildings they had never entered, and how employees who questioned the numbers were pressured to resign. One bookkeeper had been threatened with the loss of her health insurance while undergoing cancer treatment. Another had been told the foundation would report her undocumented brother if she cooperated with auditors. My father accused Evelyn of stealing confidential information and violating employment agreements. Governor Reynolds responded calmly. "Whistleblower evidence submitted through counsel is being handled under state law. You will have an opportunity to make your argument through the proper legal process." The words "proper legal process" frightened my father more than any accusation. He could control private dinners, newspapers, charity boards, relatives, employees, and social circles. He could not control authenticated files, subpoenaed servers, or a documented chain of custody. Reporters at the back of the ballroom began typing rapidly. Several guests received news alerts before the confrontation had even ended. The story was already moving beyond the walls my parents had used to contain every scandal. Chloe pulled me several feet away and lowered her voice. "You're destroying Maya's inheritance too. Have you even thought about what you're taking from your own daughter?" I almost admired how quickly she returned to manipulation. "My daughter's future will not be funded with money stolen from homeless families," I said. "And unlike you, she knows who she is without a trust account." Chloe's expression twisted. She said she deserved the money because she had stayed, obeyed our parents, attended every donor dinner, smiled beside every politician, and cleaned up every crisis after I left. She accused me of escaping while she remained trapped inside the family machine. Then, in her anger, she admitted something investigators had not yet conclusively proven. The first transfer had been her idea. She had accumulated gambling debts while in graduate school and convinced my father to move money temporarily from a scholarship fund. When auditors requested supporting documentation, she suggested using my signature because I had no contact with the foundation and no money to challenge them. The family repeated the method whenever they needed cash. What began as a single theft became a system that financed their image. "I gave them everything," Chloe said, tears of fury gathering in her eyes. "You walked away and still became successful. I stayed, and they made me responsible for every lie." For one brief moment, I saw the frightened younger sister beneath the diamonds, but understanding her resentment did not erase her choices. She had watched our parents throw me out. She had helped spread the addiction story. She had used my pregnancy to brand me unstable. She had signed away money meant for mothers sleeping in cars with their children. "Being controlled explains why you became cruel," I told her. "It does not make the cruelty mine to forgive." She suddenly reached for the portfolio, but I pulled it away. Cameras captured the movement, and the investigators saw it too. My father noticed the reporter recording and ordered security to confiscate their phones and remove them from the ballroom. The head of security refused. "The governor's detail instructed us not to interfere with witnesses or evidence," he said. That was the moment my father truly lost control of the gala. Donors demanded copies of audited statements. A hospital administrator announced that her organization was suspending its partnership with the foundation. The chairman of Bennett Meridian's board asked my father to surrender access to company accounts, pending an emergency review. 2 investors stepped into the hallway to call their attorneys. My mother's closest friend removed her foundation pin and placed it beside an untouched glass of champagne. Each consequence arrived without dramatic music, fainting, or theatrical collapse. Their empire did not explode. It disconnected one relationship at a time. My mother scanned the ballroom, expecting someone to defend her. The people who once laughed at her jokes avoided her eyes. The donors she had called family moved away from her. The politicians she had photographed at fundraisers quietly instructed their aides to cancel future appearances. She approached me and whispered, "What will it take for you to stop?" I answered honestly, "Nothing. This stopped being mine to control when you stole from the public." She offered money, reinstatement in the trust, a public apology, and a seat on the foundation board. After the scandal passed, she offered what she believed I wanted most: recognition for Maya. She promised to introduce my daughter publicly as her granddaughter, create a college fund, and include her in future family events. 11 years earlier, I would have given anything to hear my mother call Maya family. Now the offer sounded like another transaction drafted in desperation. "You do not get to recognize my child as payment for my silence," I said. "She was worthy before tonight. She was worthy when you ignored her birth announcement. She was worthy when you returned every photograph I mailed. She was worthy before you needed me to save your reputation." My mother's face tightened. "Then you really do want to destroy us?" I shook my head. "No. I want you to stop using the word family as a shield against consequences." Behind her, the screen displayed the names of housing programs that had never received the money promised to them. For the first time that evening, my mother turned and looked at the list. Whether she felt guilt, fear, or only the loss of control, I couldn't tell. But she finally saw the people whose suffering had financed her perfect life. My father made one final attempt to rewrite the story. He walked onto the stage, took the microphone, and announced that he had recently discovered financial irregularities caused by Chloe. He claimed he had invited the governor to help expose them and suggested my arrival had been part of a confidential family intervention. Chloe stared at him in disbelief. My mother whispered his name, warning him to stop. But he continued. "As a father, I failed to see that one of my children was struggling." He told the guests, "I accept responsibility for trusting too easily." It was a polished speech designed to sacrifice Chloe while preserving himself. He had done the same thing to me 11 years earlier. This time, Chloe refused to remain useful. She climbed onto the stage and shouted that every transfer required his approval. She described meetings where he selected which projects would lose funding, and she revealed that my mother helped create false photographs for donor presentations. My parents began accusing each other in front of the entire room. Their celebrated marriage, often featured in society magazines as a model partnership, unraveled into a competition over who had signed which lie. I did not interrupt them. Revenge is often imagined as a perfect speech that leaves the villain speechless. Mine was quieter. I simply gave them enough space to tell the truth about one another. When my father claimed the forged authorization had been Chloe's work alone, the technician played an audio recording recovered from Evelyn's backup. His voice filled the ballroom. "Natalie is gone. Use her name. If this ever surfaces, people will believe she took it." My mother's voice followed. "Make sure the dates match the week she left. It will look like guilt." My father stopped speaking. Chloe lowered the microphone. No explanation could survive his own words. Governor Reynolds then announced that the state had suspended all pending grants involving the Bennett Foundation. The Attorney General's Financial Crimes Division had obtained warrants for foundation servers and relevant business accounts. He was careful not to declare anyone guilty, but the consequences were immediate. Bennett Meridian's board placed my father on administrative leave. 3 major sponsors withdrew from the foundation's upcoming campaign. The university scheduled to name a leadership center after my mother released a statement pausing the dedication. Chloe's consulting firm lost its largest public contract before midnight because the application had relied on falsified charitable impact data. Their collapse was not based on my accusation. It came from contracts, bylaws, evidence, and decisions made by people who no longer found the Bennett name profitable. My mother turned to me with tears in her eyes. "Was this your plan from the beginning?" she asked. "To take everything?" I shook my head. "My plan was to clear my name and protect the people you are still stealing from. Losing everything is the consequence of what you did, not the purpose of what I did." She asked whether I had ever loved them. It was a cruel question because it treated accountability as proof of hatred. "I loved you long after loving you was harmful," I said. That was the problem. My father told me I would regret humiliating him after he died. I reminded him that he had allowed my daughter to grow up believing her grandparents wanted nothing to do with her. "You were willing to let us carry shame for the rest of our lives, so you could keep your birthday speeches," I said. "Do you regret that?" He looked past me toward the donors abandoning the ballroom. Even then, he mourned the audience more than the daughter standing before him. Chloe approached me again, no longer defiant. She offered to testify against our parents if I helped her avoid prosecution. I told her that decision belonged to her attorney and the state, not me. She accused me of pretending to be morally superior. "No," I replied. "I'm refusing to become the person who secretly decides which family member should carry everyone else's crimes. Would you have protected a sister who helped ruin your name? Or would protecting her only teach her that blood can erase any betrayal?" That was the question I carried as investigators escorted my parents and Chloe into separate rooms for interviews. The gala ended without cake, applause, or a family embrace beneath the chandeliers. By morning, photographs of my mother slapping me appeared beside headlines about the suspended foundation. The video of Governor Reynolds asking, "Do you know who she is?" spread quickly. But the line that mattered most came afterward when he identified me as counsel for the whistleblower whose evidence had triggered the investigation. For 11 years, search results attached my name to rumors of addiction and theft. Within days, newspapers corrected the old accounts. Former employees came forward with additional records. Local organizations confirmed that projects promoted by the foundation had never received the money promised to them. 3 months later, my father and Chloe were indicted on charges involving fraud, conspiracy, falsified filings, and obstruction. My mother faced separate charges related to donor misrepresentation and evidence tampering. The criminal cases took time, and I did not pretend an indictment was the same as a conviction. However, the social empire they had protected collapsed immediately. Carter Meridian removed my father as chairman after an independent audit uncovered unauthorized transactions. The family foundation dissolved under court supervision, and its remaining assets were redirected to the housing programs it had exploited in advertisements. My mother's charity boards asked for her resignation. Chloe sold her condominium to pay legal fees and restitution obligations connected to civil settlements. The mansion where my father hosted his birthday gala was placed on the market after lenders froze several company-backed credit lines. None of those losses gave me my 20s back. They did not erase the nights I studied while Maya slept beside a stack of case books. They did not give my daughter grandparents who had attended school plays, birthdays, or hospital visits. Revenge did not repair the past. It stopped my family from profiting from the version of the past they had invented. 6 months after the gala, my mother sent me a handwritten letter. She apologized for the slap, the clinic appointment, and the years of silence. She also asked me to write a statement explaining that she had acted under my father's influence. Even her apology contained an escape route. I returned the letter through her attorney without a personal response. My father sent no apology. He sent a message saying Maya should visit him before it was too late. I asked Maya, who was now 11, whether she wanted contact. She read the message and asked one question. Did he ever ask how I was before he needed something? When I said no, she chose not to visit. I respected her decision because my parents had never respected mine. Chloe eventually accepted a plea agreement requiring cooperation, restitution, and testimony about the foundation's finances. She requested a private meeting with me. I agreed once, in my office, with attorneys present. She arrived without the diamonds, tailored dresses, or confident smile she had worn at the gala. She said she had spent her life competing with me because our parents taught her that only one daughter could be valued at a time. When I became pregnant, she saw an opportunity to become the permanent favorite. Later, she realized being favored meant becoming useful to them. But by then, she had built her entire identity around winning. I thought if you came back, I would disappear, she said. I believed she felt remorse. But I also believed remorse did not create an obligation for immediate reconciliation. You didn't have to love me, I told her. You only had to refuse to frame me. She asked whether we could ever become sisters again. I don't know, I said. Forgiveness, when it comes, is not the same as restored access. Some people apologize because they finally understand the damage. Others apologize because the damage has reached them. Time reveals the difference. My professional life changed too. I helped establish a legal clinic for whistleblowers and people falsely accused through financial identity fraud. Evelyn became an advisor to the restructured housing fund. The money recovered from civil actions helped complete 2 shelters my mother had used as fictional success stories. At the opening of the first building, no ballroom guests applauded my family's name because the Bennett name was not on it. The shelter was named Harbor House by the women who would live there. Maya helped paint a blue line along the children's reading room. Watching her laugh with paint on her hands gave me something the Gala never could. Proof that a legacy does not have to be inherited. It can be rebuilt honestly. People often ask whether humiliating my parents publicly made me feel victorious. The truth is that I did not feel powerful when my mother slapped me, when my father ordered me through the kitchen, or when their secrets appeared on the screen. I felt clear. For the first time, I understood that their rejection had never measured my worth. It measured how dangerous the truth was to them. I did not destroy my family by exposing the evidence. The family they advertised had never existed. There was only a business arrangement built from fear, silence, favoritism, and stolen money. Once I stopped protecting that illusion, it collapsed under its own weight. My parents tried to remove me from the gala because they believed they still controlled the door. They did not realize I had stopped asking to be invited years earlier. I came back because my name was hidden inside their crime, and I left with it restored. So tell me honestly, if your family ruined your reputation, rejected your child, and asked for forgiveness only after losing everything, would you open the door again, or would you finally lock it from your side? We appreciate you staying with this story until the end. All characters and events are fictional and created only for storytelling, entertainment, and education. We hope it reminds you that your healing may not happen quickly, loudly, or perfectly, but it still matters. Every time you choose not to return the harm done to you, you are choosing yourself again.